A few years into building Aero Group, someone asked me a question I wasn't ready for. We'd been talking about the business, where it was going, what we were building, and at some point they stopped me and said, "But Arndt, what would you build if this were entirely your decision to design? No path you'd already started down, no momentum you have to keep. If you were building this from scratch, completely free, what would it look like?" Now, I didn't have a clean answer to that, which surprised me because I thought I'd been building the thing I wanted. But the question landed differently with me. It was asking something I'd never quite asked myself. I've since asked a version of that question to a lot of senior executives who are navigating this transition. And almost none of them have a quick answer either. Not because they're not ambitious, because for the last 20 or 30 years, the question was answered before they had to ask it, right? The organization had a direction, the role had a mandate, the next opportunity appears and you kind of move towards it. That's not a criticism, it's just how operating careers work, right? The structure provides the path. But now the structure is gone or is about to disappear for some of you, and what's replacing it for the first time in perhaps 20 years or longer is a genuine choice. And for the first time in perhaps 20 years, that choice is actually yours. And I think a lot of people in this transition underestimate what that actually means. If you don't know me, I'm Arndt Halbach. I've spent the last 20 years working with over 1,000 senior executives across 50 countries to help them build independent practices that are genuinely theirs. That experience is why I came up with the idea of the second curve architecture, because I really want to help you navigate this transition successfully. And here's the thing about this choice that you now have. At first, it doesn't feel like freedom. It will feel like a vacuum. Your calendar isn't filled automatically anymore. Nobody is sending you emails and problems to solve. Your next chapter isn't predetermined by an organizational structure. And for people who've been operating inside high pressure roles for decades, man, that absence of structure is genuinely nerve-wracking. Even if you were convinced that that was exactly what you were looking for, right? I've had executives describe the first few months of independence as kind of the strangest professional experience of their lives. Not because it's hard in the way that a difficult quarter is hard. It's hard in a different way, because the thing that used to generate the pressure and the direction and the sense of urgency, that's gone now. And nothing has replaced it yet. But underneath that sense of disorientation, if you sit with that question long enough, rather than just rushing to fill the vacuum with kind of whatever is available, something else starts to become visible. The discomfort isn't emptiness. It's the space that was always there behind the noise of your operating role. And in that space is the question that's been waiting. What do you actually want to build? Not what you are capable of building, what you want to build. Now, those are two very different questions. And most people in this transition never quite get to the second one. There's a guy on Instagram called Simon Squibb, who's built a large following by walking up to strangers and asking them that one question. Hey, what's your dream? He asked that question on street corners, coffee shops. He asked it to people who hand him his McDonald's takeaway food, right? And it's generally moving to watch because most people haven't been asked that question in years. They hesitate. Not because they don't have an answer, but because that question feels really unfamiliar to all of us. And the point he's making, and I think he's right, is that dreams are kind of democratic. Anyone can have a dream. But here's what's really quite different about where you are. Simon asked that question to young people at the very beginning of their journey. People who are still figuring out what they're capable of, they're still building their skills, still learning, working out how the world actually operates. Now, you've been asked it with kind of 25 or 30 years of that already behind you. You know how organizations really work, not in theory, but in real life. You know what it actually takes to get a decision made, to build a team, to hold the business together when things get tough. You know where the real problems are. You have pattern recognition that you can't fully articulate maybe, but it shows up every time you walk into a room and you immediately understand what's going on. So you've already done the hard part of becoming someone who can build things. So the question is now what you want to build with all of that. That question is available to you in a way genuinely wasn't before. And you're better placed to answer it than you've ever been. So let's look at this as a pattern, okay? You've got two kinds of executives navigating the same transition, arriving in very different places. The first approaches the transition primarily as a continuity problem. How do I find advisory roles or board seats or the consulting engagements that feel closest to what I've been doing? The goal is to get back to something familiar, to recover the shape of the career they understood. And the honest truth is that from watching many people do that, most of them never quite get there, not fully. Yes, consulting engagements come in, but slowly and not quite the ones they maybe imagined. Income will fluctuate in ways that feels actually undignified after 30 years of kind of reliable structure. The calendar has things in it, but not quite the right things. And from the outside, it can still look fine. From the inside, and people have told me this directly, years later, it feels like you're kind of slowly running out of road. The second kind of executive does something different. They accept this disorientation and take it seriously. Not as a problem to solve as quickly as possible, but as a piece of information. They take time to answer the question of what they actually want to build. So they make deliberate choices, right? These are the problems I find genuinely interesting. These are the kind of clients I want to work with. This is the contribution I want to make in this new chapter of my life. And this is how it all connects to my bigger purpose, if you will. This is how it will balance with my family and other interests. Some of those executives build advisory practices around problems they genuinely care about. Some invest in younger businesses, maybe startups. Some create their own platforms and collaborations they couldn't really build within their corporate roles. And a few build things that bear no resemblance to what came before, because they finally had the space to notice that, hey, that's what I actually am drawn to and have been all along maybe. And several years in, they describe that transition in ways that still surprise me. Not as, oh, I managed a different period of my life quite well, but something more like, man, I didn't realize that this was possible. You know, I thought the best professional years were behind me, but it was quite the opposite. So the difference between those two groups isn't capability. It is whether they take the question seriously, right? What do I want to build? Not as a thought experiment, but as a genuine design decision. Now, I want to offer you a reframe of your transition, just a different way of seeing what's actually going on. Most of the language around executive transition is about continuity, maintaining your relevance, replacing your income, staying in the game, one of my favorites, and all of that matters. And the second curve architecture is built to help you do exactly that. But underneath those very practical questions, there's something rarer going on, something that most professional lives never quite ever make space for. And the chance is to write your own story. Now, I use the word authorship, and very deliberately, because I think that's what it really is. For the first 30 years of your career, someone else was holding the pen and writing the story. The organization sets the direction, the role defines the next chapter, next opportunities determine what happens next, right? You contribute enormously, yes, but within the story that was already being written before you were part of it. This is the first time you get to decide what the story actually is all about. What problems are you trying to solve? What kind of people are in your story? What is it building toward? Not what's available or what's expected of you, what makes sense for you and what you actually choose. For most people in your position, that kind of choice genuinely hasn't been available before. The operating role was too demanding, the structure of a corporate is too defining, then the next steps are always obvious. Right? There was never quite enough space to ask, what would I write as a story if I was writing it myself? And so what a great moment really in your life to be able to look at this blank sheet of paper and write your story. So the executives I've watched build something remarkable in this new chapter of their lives, the ones who look back after 10 years and say that this was better than everything else that came before, they didn't all follow the same paths, right? The specifics look very different for every person. What they share is that they took the question seriously. They didn't fill the vacuum immediately with the first available thing that came to mind. They sat with it and thought about what they actually wanted to build, what story they were actually going to write. And then they built it deliberately. Now that's what this channel is about. Not what the second curve should look like. Now it's how it is yours and on your terms and in your words. Your story is waiting to be written. Now the architecture that I propose here gets you there. All the 3 layers, every component is in the anchor video on this channel. Link is in the description. Now please hit the subscribe button if this is the kind of conversation you've been looking for. And I'll see you in the next video.